Hey y'all, this is Connie with Connie Creates Life. Today's video is going to be all about cookie decorating. I'm going to walk you through step by step, show you some of the tools that I use, show you some different techniques, icing consistencies, things like that. The theme for today is fun in the sun. So let's have some fun. Thank you for watching, and let's get to it. Okay, first cookie is the sun. I am using yellow 20-second consistency royal icing in a tipless bag. 20-second consistency is how long it takes for the icing to heal if you run a knife through it. It's how long it takes for it to come back together and make a smooth surface. I use the tipless bags because, for one, it's less cleanup. There's not really any need for a tip when you're outlining and flooding a cookie. So I prefer to use these bags. They're a little bit thinner than regular piping bags, so they're easier on your hands. So I'm using the finger on my non-piping hand to help guide the bag. When I'm flooding, it's not really necessary, but it just helps steady the bag. If you shake, use your other hand to help guide, and you'll get a better line. Now I'm using a needle tool to heal the icing, to move it around, to make sure my cookie is completely covered. Now this is a 20-second consistency. It's a little bit thicker than regular piping icing, which means it's going to pretty much stay where I put it. So I don't have to worry too much about it running off the side. You'll see in a minute where I had to kind of scrape it off because I pushed it too far over. So right now I'm just healing the icing and making sure my cookie is completely covered. I'm going to pick it up and shake it here in a minute to kind of help it heal, and tap it just a little bit before I set it to the side and let it dry for at least 6 hours, or put it in a dehydrator at your lowest setting for about 30 minutes. So I am using this cutter that I got in another kit. It was a build your own snowman kit at Christmas time, and they just were the perfect size. So I just used that cutter to trace the inside of it to make these sunglasses. So I'm using a 20-second consistency black icing in a tipless bag, and I've cut the hole just a little bit smaller just because I wanted to be able to get a little bit better, smaller line, because I knew I was going to be doing smaller detailed work. So I'm outlining my drawing, and I used a edible food marker. It's from Sweet Sugar Bells, to do the tracing. All of those are available at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or through Amazon. And Amazon is where I get my tipless bags also. I'm going to use my needle tool to kind of manipulate the icing a little bit. And small details, it's easier just to use your needle tool to move the icing, like in the little bump outs on the side of the sunglasses, and to make the line just a tad bit thicker there in the middle of the glasses. It's just easier to use the needle tool to put the icing there than try to make sure you get a fine enough line with your piping bag. So now you can't see, but I'm grabbing a white piping bag, 20-second consistency also. I've cleaned off my needle tool, and I'm just squeezing just a little bit on the tip of my needle tool to make the reflection in the sunglasses. If I tried to pipe it, it would be way too large. This just gives it a whole lot finer detail. So I'm going to do that on both sides, just to make the reflection on the glasses. I'm using the needle tool to kind of shape that reflection the way I want it. And I also got a little bit of black in there, so I just moved the white around so you couldn't see it. Now I am piping the mouth, and to me it's easier to put a dot where you want to start and put a dot where you want to finish and kind of connect them. That way you're not wondering, where do I stop? Where do I stop piping? Excuse me. This next cookie is, I call it kind of a Franken cookie. I didn't actually have a cookie cutter in this shape. I used the bottom of a party hat cookie cutter, and I flipped it around and used the same bottom part to do both sides. You can see the lines in the cookie. Those really don't matter. They're fixing to be covered up. Again, I'm using a 20-second consistency icing in a tipless bag, this time in a light blue, outlining and flooding. And when I outlined, you saw how I curved. I made the little swirls when I came in. That's just to define the curves on the, I'm calling it a cloud. It's not a cloud, it's a splash of water. Just to define those curves a little better. It's going to be a little bit less work manipulating the icing and getting it where I want it to be. Again, coming back with the needle tool and flattening out the icing. Pick it up, shake it. Be real careful when you shake it not to let it loose. There have been a couple of times where it just slipped out of my hand and ruined the whole cookie. Things happen. Just try hard not to drop your cookie. Anyway, I'm going to come back in with the white, and this is 20-second consistency again, and I'm just going to make some splashes. And this is a wet on wet technique. We're not going to be manipulating it once we put it on. You can tell when you put it on there first that it is raised above the surface. We're going to pick it up and shake it and tap it, and it will sink completely down and you'll have a flat surface. That's why you want to make sure that your icing consistencies are the same when you're doing a wet on wet technique. So the camera angle is different here, and I know you can tell. I have a really hard time being consistent with my handwriting. I have horrible handwriting. So I searched and searched to find an affordable way and an easy way for me to be able to get consistent results in my piping of writing. So what I'm using here is called a Pico projector. It's what you can use to watch movies. I hook it up to my cell phone. I can make the images larger or smaller depending on the cookie and the design that I'm doing. I can basically take any design. If I can find a picture of it, I can project it and put it on a cookie. So the camera angle has changed because I'm now recording with my iPad because I have to have my phone hooked up. So I'm using the white 20-second consistency and a tipless bag to do the writing. I chose to do this because I didn't really want to make any extra piping bags, and it worked out. So I'm just following the outline of the projected letters which say Splish Splash and piping them on there. There you can get a better look with some lighting on it. You have to turn the light off to be able to get a good image. Alright, this next one is our Summer 2020 cookie. Again, 20-second consistency, royal icing in a tipless piping bag, this time in purple. And again, I outline specific ways to make it easier on myself when I go to flood the cookie. It just gives you a crisper edge, a crisper corner, and it's a lot less work when you're flooding. And I'm going to go back in and flood this cookie the exact same way. I don't have to put a ton of icing. You definitely want it to be full. You want it to be a nice full cookie, but you don't want to overflow it. Even though this icing is on the thicker side of a flood, if you put a ton of icing on there, it could go over to the side. You'll see that there's still some cookie showing, but I'll move it around and cover that up, and it won't be an issue. You also notice that I'm moving from, not just from the edge of the cookie. I'm coming in a little bit and pushing that icing out. I'm not just working on the very edge. And the reason you want this to be nice and flat is because it gives you a nice clean surface for writing later on. I'm going to outline this cookie in a contrasting color after I do my writing, and so the outline will cover up any flaws that I have. I'm going around now and just scraping off any excess, and I wipe off my needle tool a lot, so I go through a lot of paper towels. You'll see that over on the side of the screen. So pick it up and shake it, flatten it out, set it to the side, and let it set up for 4 to 6 hours or 30 minutes in the dehydrator at the lowest setting. And you can see, you pick it up, you shake it, you run the risk of touching the icing, but you can clean it up and not be a problem. There's also a little air bubble in there. I'm going to fix that because I really do want a nice flat surface. And then go ahead and set that to the side and let it dry. Again, I'm going to be using my Pico projector. Now, I, ahead of time, typed all these out on a Microsoft Word document, and I used the same font for the whole cookie set because I wanted it to be consistent. So I can choose any font I want to use. So my iPad does not hook up to this projector. They do not like to talk to each other, so basically I type it out on my iPad. I snap a picture of it with my phone, and I make it pretty small. I take it for a little ways away, but when I hook it up to the projector, I can actually manipulate it and make it larger on my phone screen. I think you'll be able to see that on a later cookie, maybe. But you can make it larger or smaller to fit your cookie, and then you don't touch it again, and it gives you some consistent cookies. And there's the finished piping. I'm going to come back and outline it with yellow. This is the same yellow that we used on the sun, so 22nd, and tipless bag. Just going to completely outline the cookie, and then I'm going to come back in with 3 other colors and just put some dots just to give it a little bit more color. Something else you may see is my cookie turntable. It's kind of like a Lazy Susan for cookies, and it is absolutely wonderful when you're trying to pipe around the edge of a cookie, basically doing anything. You can turn it around. You don't have to touch the cookie while you're doing it. It just makes your life easier. I think that may have come from Sweet Sugar Bells also. So I'm just making dots in the orange on all 4 corners. And then I will come in with green, and I'm just going to basically make a triangle with these dots. Just want to give it a little bit more color and tie it in with some of the other cookies in the set. Every single cookie that you do does not have to be so intricate. You can do a simple design just to accent. If every single one of your cookies were so detailed, they would be way more expensive and take you a whole lot longer to do. So I like to combine simple and detailed cookies to make a really nice cookie set. And there we go. This next one is going to be a beach ball. Now again, you'll see the tracing on the cookie itself. I used my Sweet Sugar Bell food safe marker, and I basically projected a picture of a beach ball and I traced it. That way I could have the lines that I needed to make the cookie look like a beach ball. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to pipe every other area. And the reason I do that is because I want some definition between the areas. So I'm coming in with red, 20-second consistency, again, tipless bag. I'm not going to be using any piping tips in this video on this cookie set. So I'm outlining and flooding, just following the design that I traced, using my needle tool to manipulate the icing and flatten it out. And then I will go to the next, not the next, but one over from that. I'm doing these in rainbow, so this next one is yellow. And the reason I want to do it like this is because I want to make sure that there's a really good defined line between the colors. And the way you do that, the way you show a lot of definition, is by letting certain parts of the cookie dry before you add the next element. So now I'm going in with the blue, outlining and flooding, and then I'll manipulate it and get it nice and smooth. The center area is really not that big of a deal because we're going to come back in the end and put some white on there for the end of the beach ball, and we can cover up any mistakes we have on that end. So we're going to let this crust for at least an hour. And we're going to come back in and fill in the remaining outside parts of the beach ball. This one is orange. Outlining and flooding and just filling in that area. Sometimes when you have smaller areas that you're doing every other one, maybe on a quilted cookie, you can do a couple of areas, then come back and manipulate. This is a pretty big area, so you don't want to let it set up too much. Royal icing, if you've never used it before, will crust, and it'll do it pretty quick depending on how thin your icing is. It forms a crust pretty quick, and if you try to manipulate it after it has crusted, you will totally mess up your cookie. Now I'm coming in with the green. The only really bright color in this set is red. The rest of them are pretty muted, and I kind of wanted it to be that way, not too much in your face. Believe it or not, this cookie set is for adults and kids, so I wanted it to be friendly for both. And the last color here is the purple. Outlining and flooding. And when I manipulate the icing, I want to kind of make sure that the edge of the new icing meets up with the edge of the crusted icing from before, so it has a nice round shape on the outside. After I get this smoothed out, I'm going to let it dry for at least another hour before I come back in and finish it up. And the last step is putting the white, and that is on the top of the beach ball. Basically, I'm just doing an outline where they all meet and just filling it in. And if there's any really messed up areas, just use your needle tool and push it out and make it a nice circle. Definitely want to remember to wipe off your needle tool every time you use it, because you don't want to introduce color where it doesn't belong. The reason I was messing with that so much is because I didn't wipe it off well enough, and it had a darker color on there, and I'm trying to get it covered up by moving the icing around a little more so you can't see it. So that's me fixing a mistake. All right, this last cookie is a tie-dyed t-shirt, and I'm going to take every single one of those colors except for the white and use it on these shirts. So I am outlining this so I have a good starting point, so I have a nice outside edge. I'm going to use every single color. Now I'm going back and making that a little bit wider, a little bit firmer pressure on that bag, because I want to make sure I get a good bit of that icing on there. And now I'm going to come in with red and outline. And basically, it will be the same thing with every other color. You do not have to be precise with this. You just want to make sure you get all the colors on there. It's tie-dye. Tie-dye is not perfect. We're going to do a wet-on-wet technique for this. So it's all going to be moved around anyway. Just get the color on there. And I'm using a pretty good amount of pressure on here because the tip of my bag is not that big. The more pressure you put, the more icing that's going to come out. Something else I want you to notice is the way I'm holding this bag. I have the top of the bag where it's tied off between my thumb and forefinger, and I am using my entire hand to squeeze that bag. Alright, now I'm making sure all this icing is touching, and I'm going to take my needle tool and start in the middle and work my way out and make this tie-dye. In and out, all the way around. A couple of cookies in this set are just plain tie-dyed, but a couple more have, but the other, 10 of the dozen have names on them. So this cookie, to finish it off, I'm just going to outline it in black, and it will be finished. You see how it all flattens out? Now here's where I put the names on it using the same technique with my Pico projector. I've just typed out all the names, all in the same font. They're all going to be the same size. And I'm using the black 22nd consistency icing in the tipless bag to trace all the letters. You have just a little bit of leeway with this. When you pull it out from underneath the projector, you can manipulate it just a little bit. But you want to do your best to make sure that you outline as well as possible. Now I have a couple other ways that I transfer letters onto cookies, or that I did before I got my projector, and I may show you all that in another video. Because these projectors are, I think the whole setup, including the stand and the connectors, ended up costing me about $150. But when you compare that to a copy cake, which is, in this profession, that's the gold standard, it's about $500. And that's not something that I wanted to spend. Alright guys, that's about it.